Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new, if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, enables me to do what I love, and hopefully continue to bring you content that you love. So, without further ado, let's break down the fantasy performances for the Patriots and Bucs Sunday Night Tilt. And we're gonna do a fantasy style Relentless rundown. We'll start with New England, who had a great game from Mac Jones. He looked polished and solid in this performance. He finished 31 out of 40 for 275 yards. He had a pair of touchdowns and a pick. Now, I would say the pick, honestly, wasn't really his fault. He may have overthrown it just slightly. However, that ball hit his receiver's hands and it ended up just bouncing off and into the waiting arms of Antoine Winfield Jr. So you can't fault him too much for that. This was by far the best that he's looked all season, and it was a gutsy performance when we think about all of the extenuating factors that were going on around him. I think next week against Houston, it's an intriguing matchup for sure, but I'm just not ready to move him into that two quarterback kind of super flex range just yet. He is now, however, on a radar. Damian Harris was one of our lower ranked flexes, and he busted big time. He was just not able to get anything going. The Patriots only attempted 8 total rushes in this game, and he had half of them, but he got -4 yards off of them. Now, thankfully, at least if you played him, he was able to catch 2 balls on both of his targets for 30 yards, so he didn't leave you with negatives or a complete goose. I guess that's a silver lining, but this was brutal, and I think that we have to reevaluate what we're thinking when we're talking about starting Patriots running backs. Now, the nice thing is that he had half of the team's targets and no other running back on the roster had more than 1. So he's clearly the guy. We just don't know what the guy is gonna get as far as touches on a week-to-week basis. I think that we probably move him into very low flex or potentially even out of our rankings next week, even in a decent matchup against the Texans. Next, we're gonna move to the tight ends for New England. We'll talk about Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. Now, in our start-sit video, we talked about potentially either of these guys as a good desperation play if you had someone like Gronk or Kittle and you were looking for another option in case neither of those guys played. And each of these guys was able to produce with touchdowns. Now, they didn't do a whole lot else outside of the touchdowns, specifically Jonnu Smith, who caught 3 out of his 5 targets for 14 yards. But Hunter Henry had 32 yards. He also saw 5 targets. And if you get the touchdown from the tight end, unless you're starting one of the 3 studs, you're okay with that. I think that Henry is the guy, moving forward, if you're going to start 1 out of the 2, he's got 50 yards more on the season right now than Jonnu Smith does. They're probably still low-end tight end 1s, maybe high-end tight end 2s at best. Jacoby Myers was one of my favorite plays of last week because of his solid floor and his upside against this passing defense, and he delivered a solid game on 12 targets. He caught 8 of them for 70 yards, and they made it clear that they wanted to get him involved all over the field because he also completed not 1, but 2 passes for 45 yards. So he was a weapon all over the field for them, and they are going to continue to give it to him. Mac Jones trusts him, and he was a go-to guy in key situations. I think he's got low-end wide receiver 2 appeal once again against the Texans. Kind of little else of note when we're talking about the Patriots offense, but we'll quickly go over Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Agholor because combined they put together a solid performance. They had 10 targets and 113 yards. Now, I'm saying neither one right now surely is a starter for you, but they could be on your radar, and if you're in a deeper league and just need some depth or a little bit of a lottery ticket, these might be a decent add. Well, now I'll move to the Bucs, and I apologize. Guys, I was off on this call and really this team. I loved Brady. I thought he would go absolutely berserk in this game, and it just wasn't to be. I think part of it's the weather, for sure. But he just really wasn't himself fully in this game. He was not dominant. He wasn't super crisp. He sailed some throws. And so we might have to take a step back and reevaluate where we have Tom Brady on our rankings, because he's not going to be top 5 maybe for a couple weeks. He has just 1 touchdown in his last 2 games combined, and he finished the evening completing just 22 out of his 43 attempts for 269 yards. No touchdowns, no picks, no nothing. Now, the matchup against the Dolphins isn't poor, but it's certainly not great. They're still in the upper half of the NFL. They have a pair of excellent corners, and I think though Brady is going to probably finish our rankings as a QB1, it'll be closer to that 10 to 12 range than it is to top 5. For the running backs, Leonard Fournette looked excellent, and he was called upon in this one early and often to help keep Tampa Bay ahead of the sticks, and he delivered on that. He had 20 carries in this game, which actually ends up being just 1 less than Ronald Jones in the entire season, including this game. So he is clearly the feature back, the guy that they want to give it to, and he was able to turn those touches into 91 yards on the ground. He also added 3 catches on 5 targets for 47 yards. So a big day for him. He's going to for sure be a high-end flex for us next week, and he has the potential to crack our low-end RB2 rankings in a plus matchup against Miami. Ronald Jones saw just 6 carries and didn't do a whole lot with them. Clearly at this point he's taking a back seat to Leonard, and although he might be maybe a decent stash in deeper leagues because of his potential upside in the offense should Fournette get hurt, I think right now he's more likely a drop candidate. For those of you wondering what the tight end position was going to look like without Gronk in this one, we didn't see a whole lot. Now, I will say you love to see the 6 targets that Cameron Brate got. That's great. However, he was able to only catch 2 balls, and he turned it into just 29 yards. So I don't think there's a tight end that you are starting in this offense until Gronk comes back. We finally make it to the receivers, and we'll start with the guy that I loved most and probably let us down the biggest, and that is Chris Godwin. He was a wide receiver 1 coming in, and while he didn't kill you with his output, you certainly didn't love it. He only saw 5 targets, and that was in a day where Brady threw the ball 43 times. So that target share is not great. He had 3 catches for 55 yards, and almost all of those yards came on back-to-back plays right before halftime. So I think he slides to maybe a mid-tier wide receiver 2. We're not benching him anytime soon, but we still would have liked to see more here. A guy that I was off on, coming off so quickly from that COVID-19 inactive list, was Antonio Brown, and he didn't look any worse from the wear whatsoever, to be honest. He had 11 targets. Brady was on him all night, and those targets were more than his first 2 games combined, so they weren't easing him in by any way, shape, or form. Now, he had a 40-yard bomb that was caught but called back due to a penalty, and he just barely by his fingertips missed a 30-yard touchdown. So this could have actually been a giant day for him. He was still able to finish with 7 catches and 63 yards, and will have flex appeal with some big upside against Miami. Finally, we'll finish with Mike Evans, who saw the most targets on the team with 12 and delivered. He was able to turn those into 7 catches for 75 yards. Now, something that was surprising to me was, especially without Gronk, as they got into the end zone, they didn't really look for Mike Evans a whole lot, and he's usually the go-to guy in those situations. And New England was able to stop the Bucs, and so I think that they maybe take a step back and reevaluate what that offense looks like in the red zone. I expect an uptick in red zone targets for Evans next week, and it's got a feeling of one of those games where he gets into the end zone after 2 straight weeks without one. And that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, drop those down below. If you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it, and it helps me out. I'm Abraham Opatz. This is Relentless Press. See you next time.